Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. I am Simply G, and today I'm going to be showing off all of my pickups for the last half of March. There's quite a few new releases to get through in regards to manga. I also have an anime, so rather than wasting too much time on this, I'm just going to get straight into it, and I hope you guys enjoy. First up, we have some anime, and this is Discotheque's Blu-ray release of Library War. So this is a 12-episode series plus special about... It's a light novel adaptation of a series of the same name, and it is of a alternate near-future Japan in which the government has become very oppressive to free speech and to free thought, and they've put in place this thing called the Media Betterment Act in order to quote-unquote protect the citizens from, anything that may question their way of life and the government and all of those sorts of things. And in order to sort of fight this idea, and in order to combat this huge censorship of media, libraries are really the only place left where you are able to enjoy sort of uncensored media, and those are protected by the library forces, which are a prefectural implementation. So it's sort of a little bit outside of like national government, and so there seems to always be constant conflict between the Betterment Special Forces and the Library Force. And so it does take this idea of like media censorship and free speech very, very seriously. Our main character, Iku, she has just recently joined the Library Force after being inspired in her youth. She was saved, and the book she was reading was saved by a Library Force member. And it encouraged her to join as well when she got older, and she really has, she thinks it's incredibly important, as most people should, to have like different media available to fight against the censorship. But even though she has been working towards this pretty much ever since, the library that she's currently working in, currently training under her commanding officer, she really doesn't get along with him. She doesn't quite know what to do. They're always arguing and always seem to have issues with each other. You may be more familiar with this series via the manga adaptation. It does have a shoujo manga, which is about 15 volumes long, called Library Wars Love and Peace, I believe. I have not read it aside from, I think I read the first volume a long time ago, so I can't speak to that adaptation. But this series, although it does have a romance element to it, that's really not necessarily what the series is about. It is quite a serious speculative fiction piece, and I really, really enjoyed it the first time I watched it, and I'm really happy that Discotheque did go back and put this on Blu-ray. I did own the Discotheque DVDs for a while, but just hadn't gotten around to picking up the Blu-ray, which I think came out last year. This series also has a anime film sequel, which has never been licensed outside of Japan, or at least not in the US. But if you are wanting to watch it, the Japanese Blu-ray release has English subtitles. So you will still be able to watch it and understand it that way if you so wish. The series also has two or three live-action film adaptations. So obviously very popular series. I think there's been various spin-offs and manga adaptations and light novel adaptations and things like that. But really, really happy to have this series in my collection, finally on Blu-ray. And I hope you guys give it a shot, because it's very, very good. Next, we have some manga, and I'm going to start off with the only secondhand manga that I picked up for this last half of the month, and that is The Ice Wanderer and Other Stories by Jiro Taniguchi. This is a collection of 5 single chapter short stories, very focused on sort of this idea of the great outdoors, the wilderness, and man's relationship to it. If you're not familiar with Jiro Taniguchi, phenomenal seinen mangaka. He has done all sorts of things. I think his most popular and well-known manga would be The Walking Man or A Distant Neighborhood. Both really, really wonderful. And his work we do have a lot of in English, but I don't think he has nearly the reputation within the English manga community as he does in other European manga communities. He unfortunately died a couple of years ago, but we are getting some more of his work this year and hopefully in the future. Fanfare Ponentmon does put out a lot of his books, but as I said, this is a collection of 5 short stories, and it's really, obviously with a collection of works, you can always suspect that there's going to be stuff that's better than others, things that work better or just affect you more. But I find there's a very consistent quality to all of the works in this book. I wouldn't say there's anything particularly better than anything else. I really, really enjoyed the first 2 and then the last story within the series or within this book, because they do focus more so, as I said, on this relationship between man and the wild. It does make direct reference to multiple times to Jack London, so the author of books like Into the Wild and White Fang, and they actually this book does actually directly quote White Fang, I believe. So yeah, if you're not familiar with those books, they are very much this sort of same atmosphere, the same type of story, more so from an animal perspective than a human perspective, but obviously more so representative of just the savagery that lurks within everyone. It's very, very good. Obviously, that London's work is a lot older, so you may not be very familiar with him, especially if you're not reading a lot of like classic literature. But anyway, you don't need to read that to enjoy this. It is reminiscent of parts of other series, of course, things like Golden Kamui, and I would also argue things like Children of the Sea. It's just very, very good, exactly what you should expect from a Jiro Taniguchi work. And I think it's fairly easy to find this book around. I know that people were a little bit afraid that Ponentmon or Fanfare was going to quit or stop releasing some of their titles, letting them go out of print, but that was confirmed to my knowledge to be on the Spanish side, because they do publish manga in Spanish as well, rather than the English side. As I said, we are getting more Taniguchi this year with Skyhawk, and hopefully in the future we will see more of his works coming out. But yes, this was a interesting little book. Happy to finally have it in the collection. I'm a big fan of Taniguchi's work, and yeah, if you can find a copy of this or have the chance to read it, I would recommend it. It's very good, especially if you like this type of story. Next, we have the first volume of this release, and that is Shigeru Mizuki's Kitaro, The Birth of Kitaro. So if you're not familiar with what this particular book is and what this series is, Gegege no Kitaro is Shigeru Mizuki's sort of most iconic work. Mizuki is an incredibly well-respected and important mangaka in Japanese history. He died just a few years ago, but he basically established the yokai genre through this series, Kitaro. He's also very well known for his anti-war manga, which he was drawing from the moment basically he got out of the military at post-World War II. Very staunchly against, the events of the Second World War and Japan's involvement with the conflict and all these sorts of things, which is not the most popular opinion within Japan. So it was, both at the time and currently, sort of a very controversial opinion. But obviously he had a lot of experience being in those conflicts. He actually lost his arm from malaria during his time in PNG in the army. So, he was an incredible mangaka. His whole comics career he drew with his less dominant arm, obviously because he lost the other one. And as I said, he basically established yokai manga with Kitaro. So if you like series that include yokai of any sort, whether that be shoujo, shonen, whatever, you kind of have Kitaro to thank. Now, Kitaro was a story, or is a story, about a young boy called Gegege no Kitaro, or just Kitaro, who is the last of the ghost tribe. He is a yokai, and all of his friends are yokai, but he was raised by humans for the first couple years of his life after his parents tragically die before his birth. So his mother is buried. They are all yokai, they're all ghouls or creepy monsters, if that's probably a better visual for you guys. This is his father on the cover here. But after his mother dies, she's buried, and Kitaro is actually born from her dead body, crawls out from her grave, and is found by a human who is really the only one that knows of these yokai, and raised by this human and his family for a short time. But Kitaro doesn't have a very good experience with humans. He's always made fun of. They think he's weird and creepy, and he sort of is. But he acts as sort of this middleman between humanity and yokai. So whenever an issue arises, he sort of sorts it out between the two sides, but in a way to prevent conflict and prevent them from annoying each other, just allowing them to live in peace. It's not so much that he has any fondness for humanity, but he'd rather just not have any of the yokai involved with them. But he's a pretty interesting character. He's pretty rascally and definitely up to mischief a lot of the time, but ultimately like the good guy. Also, I do want to mention, you can sort of see it here and obviously referenced here, but as I said, this is his father. Despite his father dying, his soul goes into his eyeball, and so basically his father is still with him just as his eyeball, with arms and legs, and he's, just there. This it's a weird manga, but it's very fun. It's a kids series, so be aware of that. And of course, this was written in the 60s, so it is older. It's not going to necessarily hold up to current manga, but it is a very fun, very well done, and just a really great read. These books are put out by Drawn Quarterly. They are actually collections of select chapters from the Kitaro manga. I believe there's like 120 all up chapters, but these series of books just picks the best chapters and collates them into one. So with this book, we do have not just the birth of Kitaro, which is on the cover, as I said, and that I sort of talked about, but we also have introduction to a lot of the very iconic characters within this manga, most notably Nezumi Otoko and Neko Musume. But there's a lot of characters very beloved and well known within the Kitaro manga. Really happy to have this. Drawn Quarterly did previously put out a release just called Gegege no Kitaro, which was a very thick book. Again, just a collection of select stories. But that's very out of print now from my knowledge. These newer releases are a lot easier to find, and there's a lot of them. There's like 6 or 7 out currently, and they are focused, I guess, more so to younger people, making it affordable for them to be exposed to this series. You can even tell in the back, we have like puzzle games and things that are obviously well suited to young kids. I didn't show you the inside, but I really, really like Mizuki's manga. He's able to do like very interesting, creepy, yet very detailed things. And he mixes this sort of like very simple character design with incredibly intricate backgrounds. So really, really wonderful. As I said, I really enjoy Kitaro. Kitaro is a series that I would say is iconic within Japan. Ever since the 60s, this series has had an anime adaptation every decade. So there's one in the 60s, one in the 70s, 80s, 90s, one in 2008, I believe, and then one in 2011, and we currently have a Kitaro anime running, which I'm watching. I've only seen the 2011 and this current series. I'm not completely up to date, but check it out. That's also a real gem of a series. It, again, is a kid's show, so go into it with that knowledge, but that doesn't mean it sort of shirks away from the darker tone and the darker themes of this manga. It's definitely a surprise in some ways, and I would highly recommend either that or this manga. It's not for everyone, but if you have an interest in older manga, in Mizuki in general, his Gekiga is fantastic. We do have quite a few of his historical and anti-war manga available as well. So yeah, you should definitely check out his series, and if you're wanting a sort of a slice of true, I'd say, history of manga in your collection, and you like yokai and sort of like creepy weird stories, Kitaro is one to check out. Now getting into the actual new releases that came out this month, starting with a Seven Seas book, and this is the most recent book of The Girl from the Other Side, Shilorun, by Nagabe. This is volume 6. And this just continues to be a phenomenal series. I absolutely adore it. If you're not familiar with what this series is about, it's sort of fairy tale-esque in its atmosphere, but it follows a little girl, Shiva, and her teacher, who is this sort of black monstrous creature. And they live within a world where these black outsiders are sort of harbingers of destruction and death, and they're really seen as like cursed beings. And then we have humanity, or the insiders, who are completely afraid of these creatures, and this idea of being able to, like, if you're unlucky, being cursed by them and becoming one yourself. It really is evocative of sort of this fear of, the unknown, as well as things like this divide between folklore, which I would say the outsiders represent, and then like the religion, which is definitely the focus of the insiders, and sort of this larger church organization. There's things going on about prophecies, but ultimately this series is about Shiva and teacher's relationship. It's incredibly sweet, incredibly well done, and the current volumes have been just absolutely heartbreaking and just powerful to read. I absolutely recommend this series. Nagabe has succeeded in writing this story that just is so incredibly genuine, and the characters so wonderful to read. for all the grief and the fear that comes up in this manga, it ultimately is about sort of the connections that we have with other people and this idea of love and caring for people even if, you know, everyone else say you shouldn't. It's really, really beautifully done. I cannot wait for the other Nagabe work we're getting this year. It seems that their manga has a very distinct style to it. Their monster design, as you can see on this cover, is really, really appealing to me. I really love how they are able to draw these strange, otherworldly creatures. And as I said, we do have another title coming up from them, which is the Wise Wizard. It's an incredibly long title. It's a BL title, and it is focused on these sort of monstrous or like animalistic creatures or boys. It's a BL, so yes, maybe not for everyone, but I find that like really interesting. Cannot wait to read it. But yes, the girl from the other side, rather, is wonderful. Every time there's a new volume out, I sit down and read it immediately. It's got a real feel of like a classic fairy tale or folklore. And if you like that sort of thing, I would definitely recommend it. Next, with Viz stuff, we have the final volume. So we have a conclusion here. The final volume of Everyone's Getting Married by Izumi Miyazono. This is a josei series that I have been singing its praises since I got the first volume. It really surprised me. Despite the title of it, it really doesn't necessarily go in the direction you may expect. And this final volume, although I do feel it wrapped up very quickly, I think there may have been potential to make it a little bit longer and flesh it out a bit more. I can understand why Miyazono maybe didn't want to do that. It's sort of an abrupt ending, but at the same time I do think it's satisfying. If you're not familiar with what this story is about, I'm going to try and avoid spoilers with this, so I'm not going to open it up too much at the back, but it follows a young woman, professional working woman, who is in love with the idea of like sort of being a housewife and having this beautiful wedding and, you know, starting a family with someone she loves, and has a real want to get married. And her partner, her boyfriend, or this man that she meets and ultimately falls in love with, he is sort of on the opposite side of this argument in that he doesn't feel it's necessary to get married to have a happy relationship. What constitutes a relationship being more important because you have the piece of paper. If you two as individuals are committed to each other and know you're committed to each other for life, like why do you need the ceremony and sort of all of that? It's not that he's necessarily against this idea of like a happy family life in the future, but he really doesn't see the value or doesn't want to get married. Obviously these two fall in love, have very different opinions and kind of like end goals, as it were, but they're both very like absolutely adore each other, very accomplished working people. He is a television announcer, works for the news and things like that. She is in real estate of some sort, a project management. So they're both, very busy people, and they're constant. It's very good because it opens up this idea of like, what do you value in a relationship and how much can be compromised? And there's a lot of different individuals in this manga who have different perspectives, and not any single person is, their opinion, valued more than anyone else's. And I think it's really refreshing to have a josei series that does feature, I guess, sort of a quote-unquote office lady romance, that the marriage, the happily ever after, isn't necessarily the end game or isn't valued as like the be-all end-all for a woman's life. It's really, really wonderful in that it challenges those ideas. This particular volume does have a time skip, so just be aware of that. As I said, I didn't want to open it up too much at the end for fear of spoilers, but after the cliffhanger of the previous volume, you may have an idea of what direction this is going. It is a happy ending. I am going to spoil that, but I don't think anyone was necessarily expecting anything else. But it's interesting how they decided to wrap it up, and I'm glad that they did sort of emphasize certain things with this ending. But really, really great manga. Nice to see how these characters have changed as their priorities have changed over the manga, and how their opinions, whilst not completely disregarded, have sort of evolved. And again, as people in relationships, how we compromise, what the things we allow ourselves to compromise on and find value in compromising on, comparatively to like sticking strictly to our beliefs, and sort of working within that minefield sometimes. It's really good, as I said. If you're looking for a josei and you want more of a romance-focused one compared to some of the other josei titles that have been coming out this year, I would definitely recommend it. At 9 volumes, it's not too long. I don't think it outstays its welcome, but it does... it wrapped up just when it needed to, in my opinion. But really, really great series, and one I would say, if you're a josei fan, check it out. Another Viz book here with one of my favorite ongoing shonen series. Absolutely adore this series, as I do with the mangaka's other work, but that is Hunter x Hunter Volume 35 by Yoshihiro Togashi. This, of course, is the ongoing shonen manga that I think is quite infamous due to the constant hiatuses that the mangaka goes on. My opinion is that I will never begrudge a mangaka's need for rest and to prioritize their health. I know that's sort of a controversial statement in regards to Togashi. I think a lot of people just regard him as, oh, he's so lazy, and oh, he doesn't want to do this series. But honestly, like, I don't care. With the amount of consistent writing that this series continues to have, despite being 20 years old at this point, it's honestly amazing how much work goes into this series that people don't really necessarily appreciate. If you're not aware with Hunter x Hunter, it's a shonen adventure type series that follows 4 young men, Gon, Killua, Kurapika, and Leorio. Gon is wanting to become, they're all trying to become hunters, which is sort of this active occupation in which you can actually pretty much do anything, but once you become a hunter, you belong to like the Hunters Association, and you have the ability to do things and go places that other people can't. Gon wants to become a hunter because his father is a hunter, and he sort of wants to see what the big deal is about, and also to sort of quell his own thirst for adventure and discovering more about the world around him. Killua is the black sheep son of an assassin family who is trying to escape their very overwhelming control of his life. Kurapika is the last remaining member of his town, of his people, the Kurta, and so he is trying to get revenge on the individuals who slaughtered his family and friends and everyone he ever knew. And Leorio is sort of the normal guy of the bunch who wants to become a hunter in order to have access to great wealth, in order to become a doctor and offer free healthcare to whomever needs it, to provide medical assistance to people who can't afford it otherwise. So really interesting group of guys or boys there. This particular arc, this particular volume, is the Dark Continent arc. We are following Kurapika and Leorio almost entirely. Gon and Killua have had a lot of focus in arcs before, but this time we are getting a shift into focusing more so on the other two. In this particular arc, it comes after a large revelation, after the last arc, that the known world is not everything that is there. And as such, there is this dark continent outside of the world map, as it were. So we have a huge amount of individuals, of hunters of all sorts of types, and we also have a ruler of a nation who is hoping to pioneer into this dark continent and basically, I guess, establish themselves, colonize it almost. And meanwhile, we also have this fight over succession between the princes of the children of this ruler, in order to be, the next one in line for the crown, as it were. Really, really great stuff. I adore how Hunter x Hunter is written, and I really commend this series for always bringing something new and fresh and challenging to the shonen genre. I would say that some people may find this not a good thing, but I find it really interesting and wonderful that every single arc within the series has a very clear, very different feeling from previous arcs. They all have very different focuses, and it doesn't feel like you're reading the same thing over and over again that I find some battle shonen tends to do. Kurapika is a incredibly interesting character. Again, people may draw parallels to other similar characters, most notably Sasuke, but of course, looking at timeline, Sasuke is the one inspired by Kurapika rather than the other way around. It just so happens that Naruto has been over now for a while, whereas because of the hiatuses, Hunter x Hunter is ongoing and seems to be ongoing for the foreseeable future. As I said, I don't begrudge Togashi his hiatuses. I don't begrudge any artist, mangaka, their hiatuses, but Togashi in particular, he's very well known for having chronic pain issues, health problems. So to be able to put your work on hold to sort of get over that, because chronic pain is a very debilitating thing to have. I don't have it myself, but I do have quite a few people in my life who do, and it's not a fun time. As I said, people do like to just draw, oh, he's lazy, all he does is play Dragon Quest. I don't care, honestly. Even if that was true, the fact that he can come back after 10 months and write something so interesting and engaging, and as I said, consistent, is honestly phenomenal. If he was just sitting there twiddling his thumbs, we wouldn't have the quality that Hunter x Hunter is. So it's obvious that even during hiatuses, during breaks, he is working on the series, if not just drawing comics all the time. And I think people are spoiled because of the Weekly Shonen Jump, weekly cycle, because they are getting One Piece and whatever else, Dr. Stone, etc., every single week, which is crazy, but, the lifestyle of a mangaka is not something to be jealous of or envious of. It's not necessarily a good lifestyle, and I would much prefer mangaka to have this sort of ability to look after themselves as well as write their comic for people to read. And as I said, I think there is definitely this idea of, if they can do it, why can't he? And as I said, people are very spoiled by weekly releases, but I would much rather artists and writers to prioritize themselves over their work. even if that means things never get finished. You know, art and media should not trump the needs of the creators, and I think that should be fairly obvious, but manga fans aren't always the most rational people, unfortunately. And I'm not talking about anyone in particular, sort of just the general young manga fans. You don't realize how much work goes into manga. And there's a lot, and it is a constant strain on health. So yes, Hunter x Hunter, great series. Yu Yu Hakusho, also great. I even enjoy Level E, I should say, even though it does have some issues. Hunter x Hunter, all of Togashi's manga really push the envelope in what's allowed or what's acceptable within shonen manga. And I hope that it continues far into the future, as long as Togashi wants to continue it. Next, we have Volume 7 of Hiromu Arakawa's Silver Spoon. This is a wonderful comedy, sort of coming-of-age manga about an agricultural school, and we follow our main character, Hachiken, who, after really not enjoying or sort of buckling under the pressures of his home life and of, you know, city life and school expectations, he decides to go to a agricultural school in Hokkaido and sort of reinvent himself, find his place amongst a much calmer environment without this constant pressure of having to excel and to exceed goals. Wonderful manga. I adore Hiromu Arakawa. I don't love every series she's worked on, but all of the series that she writes, I find phenomenal. This is definitely a comedy manga, but that doesn't, I think that it really highlights when the series does get very serious and dramatic. And if you're unaware, Hiromu Arakawa actually grew up on a dairy farm, so a lot of the experiences or events within this series, I would suspect, come from personal experience. But Hachiken as a character is really interesting to read because obviously he's very much a fish out of water amongst his peers. A lot of them come from, or almost all of them come from an agricultural background. They all have this idea of where they're going in life, what they want to do, and they have this responsibility to their family as well. The series is incredible because although it is a comedy and it is goofy and we do have a lot of like wacky characters, it never shies away from the realities that are agriculture, and not just the very obvious ones of sort of the ethical debates on agriculture and eating meat and farming in general, but also this idea of inheriting responsibility from your family, being the expectation of taking over your family's business, of finding your place in the world and finding what you truly want to do regardless of what's come from the past. It's so powerful. I've heard it said before that Full Metal Alchemist was what gained Arakawa her popularity, her respect, everything. But it's what put her in the position to be able to write this series. But Silver Spoon is her magnum opus, more so than Full Metal ever will be. And I think that's a very true statement. I think this story is the one that she's wanted to tell. And it continues to be wonderful. As I've mentioned previously, the series also has a 2-season anime adaptation that you can get from Aniplex. It's on DVD. It's very, very good. I think it's also on Crunchyroll. It used to be on Crunchyroll. Fantastic series, very funny, but as I said, it doesn't shy away from this larger discussion on so many issues regarding agriculture. Not just this, as I said, it does go into things like this idea of raising animals for consumption and this idea of sustainable farming. There's an interesting perspective on like battery hens, obviously very, very frowned upon within Western society. Like it's a terrible, terrible thing, but it's interesting to see the opinions on it within this manga and the perspective that it gives. I don't agree with it, but you can see the rationale of why it continues. I am not a vegetarian or a vegan. I don't think I ever could be, but I do think that regardless of your ethical choices in diet and your personal beliefs, that discussion on agriculture, on the treatment of animals within the farming industry, and sustainable farming as well, is very, very important. With a changing climate, with obviously more awareness on animal welfare, it's so important to be able to change how things are done, and how I would say that hopefully more people are aware of like where their food comes from and how it's being treated. As I said, I don't think you necessarily have to be totally involved with like removing meat or animal products from your diet to have an opinion on this, or to be very invested in the future of this this work. It's really, really important, and I think that hopefully things are slowly changing, especially with this growing global community. Farming's never going to go away, but we do need to adjust how things are happening, and also understand the struggles of farmers and people who are working tirelessly to provide the planet with food. It's an incredibly thankless job, and you do see a lot of that mirrored or shown off within Silver Spoon. The idea of being able to appreciate, after putting the work into creating a meal, or growing something, raising an animal, and then enjoying them as a meal, is shown as almost this respectful type of thing. You see it as well in stuff like Golden Kamui, where it is obviously focused on hunting, and this indigenous belief of by consuming an animal to its fullest and appreciating that's how you show the greatest respect to its life. And Silver Spoon is reminiscent of that. It has elements of that idea and that ideal. So yeah, wonderful series. Maybe getting a little too deep into a series that a lot of people would just regard as like a upbeat comedy series, but we do see a lot of deeper dramatic elements cracking through the surface, and especially at this point. The cliffhanger at the end of this volume was brutal, I have to say. So I cannot wait for volume 8. And I cannot wait for more. I think this is 15 volumes currently in Japan. Wrapping up sooner rather than later, but I don't know if it's heading towards a conclusion anytime soon. But yeah, great series, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are following it. If you're not, check it out. Continuing on with Hiromu Arakawa comedy, we have Fullmetal Alchemist, the complete 4-panel comics, obviously also done by Hiromu Arakawa. This is a collected little book. It's only thin of the 4-koma, or the 4-panel comics that were not only in the tankobon or the books themselves, but also various other media, including the original DVDs, the Brotherhood releases, and various other events and that sort of thing. This book, the 4-koma being not included with the 4-koma and the little like scribbles of Arakawa's jokes within the individual volumes themselves not being included in the hardcover releases or the Kanzenban releases were the biggest loss, because Arakawa, as I mentioned with this book and with the previous, is very funny. She's incredibly funny. Not afraid to take the mickey. She is so willing to make fun of her characters and incredibly serious scenes and just goof around with them. This book, it's not a necessity. If you have the individual volumes, so the box set or whatever, a lot of the first part of this book you will already have in those books. This is something for people who are really big Fullmetal Alchemist fans, or if you're collecting the Full Metal editions like I am, and wanting these 4-koma as well, then yes, you should get this. But as I said, it's not a necessity. It is mainly for fans, for people who are invested in Fullmetal Alchemist and who want, if they have the original releases, if you want the additional 4-koma, then yes, maybe pick this up. But skinny little book, it's not a must-have in everyone's collection. Obviously, as a huge Arakawa fan and as a huge Full Metal Alchemist fan, this was sort of a no-brainer for me, but obviously you have to realize your own, stance in this and whether or not you want to spend the money on something like this. But really, really funny. Arakawa is a wonderful woman who can write some incredibly humorous things, and quite a few of the 4-panel comics that were included with the manga itself were actually adapted as OVAs during the Brotherhood anime. So if you have like the OVA collection from Brotherhood, it includes those, and they're so goofy and funny and just wonderful. But yeah, obviously you personally will know whether or not you want this. I wouldn't say read it if you haven't read the manga before, or watched the Brotherhood anime at least, because there are spoilers for the series, the entire series. But yeah, otherwise it's not a must-have unless you are a super fan. Now I have a little bit of BL to talk about, the first one being something that I've been incredibly interested in ever since the license announcement, and that is Hyundai's Total Eclipse of the Eternal Heart. This is the same mangaka who did last year's incredibly well-received and beloved Go For It Nakamura, which is a really sweet, first love story, but more so it's about a teenage boy who has a big crush on one of his classmates, but it's more so about him becoming comfortable with himself and gaining confidence and, breaking out of his shyness and becoming friends with this boy. It's so sweet, so wonderful, and did very, very well. A lot of positive buzz for it last year. This book is not that. Do not go into this series expecting that, because this is almost completely on the opposite side of the spectrum for genre, for theme, for everything. And I have to commend Hyundai, because with this book they've proven how versatile they are. This is a horror thriller, BL still, but it's a serious horror thriller. And the tension that this series has is crazy. It's not for the squeamish, it's not for those who don't like horror. I would definitely recommend maybe not reading this one, because it goes all out. It doesn't just use that idea of like, oh, sort of scary, intense as a gimmick. It commits to it. This is the story of about 2 high school boys, Haruichi and then Yakumo. I believe that's his name. But Haruichi is plagued by dreams of the past, of sort of this boy being killed by someone he calls sensei from 100 years ago. And he has this recurring dream. It really creeps him out. But aside from that, his life is pretty normal. Normal high school boy, has, again, a big fat crush on one of his classmates, Yakumo, and he sort of accidentally ends up confessing his feelings to him, and surprisingly, he's very receptive. He's like, oh, yeah, I have no problem, let's go out, let's do this, blah, blah, blah. On their way home from school, though, they're walking home, and a stranger violently stabs Yakumo and leaves him for dead, bleeding out in this other boy's arms. Obviously, terrifying, horrifying. You're not expecting that, and this boy is definitely not expecting that. But almost miraculously, Yakumo gets up. He's bleeding profusely from the chest. Base should be dead. Was dead. And it's like, no, it's fine. I'll see you later. This obviously is incredibly strange. Well, he disappears after our main character sort of tries to chase after the attacker. Disappears, doesn't know where he's gone. Reports it to the police. The police are like, what are you talking about? There's no body. You expect us to believe this? And so he doesn't know what to think. The next day he visits his home to check on him, and to his surprise, he is alive and seems to be fine. No problem after being stabbed viciously. And after a while, he sort of realizes that this boy, whom he has feelings for, seems to be repeatedly attacked by other people who don't really have any memory of doing so. He seems to be repeatedly killed multiple times, and just seems to be able to, brush it off, walk away, and just get on with life. And you find out sort of the connection between our main character and this boy, and then like all the other guys, and it's really, really well done. It's a little bit abrupt in the ending, but I think it serves the story fairly well. I think if you over-explain things in a story like this, it makes it less effective. But, oh man, this book it definitely delivers on this sort of horror thriller, and it's just incredibly tense. I would not recommend this for people who don't like violence, who don't like incredibly dark themes, who don't like sort of crime mysteries with maybe a supernatural twist on it, if you want to go that far. If you don't like that sort of thing, if you don't like, high tension series, which I do like in manga and anime, at least. I'm not good with horror films in like normal horror films, but I do enjoy like true crime stuff a lot. So I don't know, I'm a little bit weird in that sense, but if you're not comfortable with that, don't read this. You're not gonna have a good time. But if you are, absolutely check this one out. I would say that it's really interesting to see a BL manga, especially, that takes the genre, this idea of like a horror story, so seriously, and doesn't just use it as a gimmick. Doesn't just use it as like pretense for, whatever the story wants to be. It's so well done. It is quite obvious as to like what's going on. It's not really a mystery so much, but it's interesting to see how each character acts with various information given to them. I really look forward to Hyundae's next book, if we ever see it or if they ever write another one, because as I said, with this book and with their previous book, it does show how versatile they are. To be able to write 2 books like this, so incredibly successful in 2 completely different genres, is talent. Like, it does show that they have a talent for writing stories and for delivering really engaging pieces. It's really, really well done. But as I said, it's not for everyone. I wouldn't blindly recommend this to everyone who enjoyed this mangaka's previous work, because obviously very different. But if you are wanting something a little bit different, if you are a BL fan and if you don't mind dark themes, or even if you're not a BL fan, it's not super like explicit or anything. There are some not great stuff that goes on, but there's nothing super explicit in so far as like you see anything, but there is definitely implications of sexual activity, so be aware of that. But yeah, it's a tricky one to talk about, but I wanted to, and I'm really happy to have it in the collection, and I hope to reread it. Maybe not immediately, but if you want something just as to creep you out a little bit before you go to bed, then try this one out. Finally, we have the continuation of Tenbans by Inoue Sato. This is volume 2. I said with the first volume that I really love this series. It is the story of 2 professional dancers who are specialize in different dance. We have a standard ballroom dancer and then a Latin ballroom dancer, and their sort of development of their relationship over time. And I have to say this second volume has really cemented it as like really one of my favorite BL, and especially ongoing BL. This is so good. It's consistently funny, it's consistently engaging and interesting. The characters are really fun to watch play off of each other. Also, again, this, as I said with the first volume, it's not explicit. We do have more so of a physical, like, kissing relationship develop in this book, but they're not so far as, like, anything explicit. And I don't know how quickly or not that element will be introduced, because this is very much a slow burn between 2 stubborn idiots. Really, really, really great to read. Again, this is one that I sat down and read as soon as I got it in the mail, and I was not disappointed. I was so upset because my first copy of this got lost in the mail, basically, and Amazon was like, oh yeah, we had to return it, order another one. And I'm like, no, I don't want to wait so much longer. Thankfully, well, not thankfully, but unfortunately I did have to order another one. It did get to me, and I just didn't want to wait so long. Volume 3 is out fairly soon, and Volume 4 has been solicited. I think that's all. 4 or 5 volumes are out in Japan currently. I'm going to be upset when we catch up, because this is really one that is really, like, I like it so much. I think it's still ongoing in Japan. I'm fairly sure. Don't quote me on that, but I'm fairly certain. Yeah, wonderful, wonderful BL. It's definitely a little bit different from other things. As I said, it's a slow burn. If you're wanting something short and to the point, like a single volumes thing, this is not that series. But I really like watching a series or a relationship develop over multiple volumes. If you're looking for a ballroom dance manga that, or BL, I should say, that gets to the point fairly quickly, read The Man of Tango, which is another series I read recently and talked about in my pickups video. This is not that, but they do have sort of similar themes in regards to just sort of like attraction and sex appeal and this idea of dance as alluring and just some really interesting stuff. And I really like the sort of, I guess, discussion of, or the comparison of ballroom and Latin dancing, and how they're both basically the same type of thing, but in very different, with very different sorts of methods of alluring their partner, as it was. It's so good. And yeah, I gushed enough about this series. I gushed a lot with the first volume. So if you're a BL fan, definitely check it out. Or if you're like a slow burn BL fan, it's one to try. But yeah, I cannot wait for the next volume and the subsequent volumes, I'm sure, because it just keeps getting better and better. We have our characters in Blackpool for sort of like an international dance competition, or one of them's in an international dance competition. The other is there just for moral support and sort of being thrown into this international dancing community full of all of these incredibly talented and important people, and also the relationship between the current champion and our main, like one of our main characters always being second place, and the previous relationship he had with number one's partner, and they're, drama. But yes, it's really great, and I, as I said, can't wait for volume 3. So that is everything that I got for the last half of March. Lots of really great stuff, lots of stuff I'm really excited about, starting some things, ending some things, and catching up on some older stuff that I had wanted to get for a while. As for next month, I, as always, have no idea. I do have some manga, like pre-order stuff that I know will be coming. As for anything else, I don't know. I can't promise anything, and yeah, it's gotten a lot. I'm so busy between like university and work and everything else that I do try to stay on top of my like reading list, and thankfully I'm fairly successful. I'm also currently going through an unhaul of a bunch of stuff from the collection. Not too much in regards to manga, but more so like anime and that sort of thing. So yes, it's been a little bit hectic the last week or so. But yeah, really, really happy to have these things in the collection. If you enjoyed, I'd love to hear about it in a comment. Let me know your thoughts on any of these titles, if any of them sound super interesting to you, or if, you know, you're not wanting to read any of them. Maybe I'm missing something insofar as like upcoming titles that I should be checking out, or ongoing things that I should be checking out. Let me know. I love reading your comments, as you guys know. So yes, I do try to get to every single one of them. Otherwise, you can always contact me or see what I'm up to on Twitter. I will leave the link in the description below, as always. I also have my Book Depository affiliate link, which is there for if you want to use it. As always, there's no obligation to, but I really appreciate it if you do. So yes, I hope you guys enjoyed watching. Thank you so much. I'll catch you in the next video, and bye till then.